And welcome all. This is our third webinar in conjunction with our friends Govern With, supported by the Governance Institute of Australia. These webinars are delivered by aligning actionable governance with the Aon Independent Schools Risk Report, the most recent of which was back half of 2022. Each month we deep dive into the underlying governance issues behind those top risks identified by you and your peers in the independent school sector. Here we have a quick recap on the top 5 risk concerns from the Independent Schools Risk Report. Risk 1, the ability to attract and retain talented staff, including succession planning, cyber threat, mental health, pandemic risk, including the impact of public health orders, and student safety. The key themes here are people first and resilience, which when connected to robust governance practices and risk management frameworks, will burnish the brand and reputation of independent schools who will be positioned to make better decisions. Today's webinar is related to risk 1, attracting and retaining talent. However, where we may default to think of our principal or key staff, today we have great governance subject matter experts who will broach the subject from the position of attracting, engaging and retaining your directors. For those who may not know me, I'm Andrew Leahy, Aon's National Education Director. I've been with Aon for 20 years and involved in the education sector since 2007. I've served many schools, led the core service team and contributed heavily to the national strategy, advocacy and thought leadership developed in this space. Joining me is the wonderful Fee Mercer, who you all would have met through webinars 1 and 2. She's the CEO and founder of Govern With, a governance review and capability platform for highly regulated not-for-profit industries. Fee's a governance specialist with over 30 years of executive and governance experience. She's supported over 600 boards, but professionally, but also gives back personally through various voluntary chair and director roles. Also with us today is Rebecca Murphy, who is Aon's Corporate Governance Practice Director. Rebecca leads the corporate governance and ESG practice Aon Australia and New Zealand. She has 18 years experience in governance and compliance with extensive experience in the financial services industry, government and higher education. So she's a specialist advisor that's able to design, review, deliver and implement effective governance, policy frameworks and processes for clients. Anyways, enough about us. We spoke at our last webinar about talent from a staff and workforce perspective, and a very important part of a school's talent is the board and its directors. The increasingly complex nature of school management today, coupled with a tighter regulatory environment, has led to a heightened expectations from the stakeholders and the belief that competencies of school board directors are on par with those in the corporate world. A school's board of directors can and should play a critical role in risk management, guiding the senior management on key business issues and taking the lead on succession planning. But who oversees the board? To a large extent, it's an exercise of self-policing, but a good relationship between the board and senior management can facilitate better governance, and the board can be seen as an asset and not a risk. It's important to have continuously high functioning directors, and when structured and managed properly, a board can be your competitive advantage. In our agenda today, Rebecca and Fee will go through an introduction to the director transition cycle, which you can see on the screen now, unpacking the elements of recruitment, induction, development, retirement, meaning end of tenure, not that you're old, and this will be followed by top tips for successor director transitions for the successful director transition cycle. So Fee and Rebecca, what is a good overall approach for boards when they have director vacancies, given that our last Independent Schools Risk Report highlighted 46% of respondents don't plan for succession until a position becomes open. And uncannily, 46% of respondents say their main obstacle to effective governance is finding directors with the right sector skills and experience to govern independent schools. Rebecca, let's start with you.
I think school boards really need to think about just one aspect of the vacancy, or not just the upcoming vacancy itself. They really need to proactively engage and plan in a more holistic approach that many boards overlook some boards go straight into recruiting for that vacancy or a similar skill director. It's going to help you get the right person in the end. Doing that top end planning will help you get the right person, but also the right skills, but also put forward how the school can best, what kind of directors you want for the school, but how to get the best match. And going through the process it'll get you, you'll end up recruiting a director within, I don't know how long it takes to recruit them in schools, but when I've worked with schools and councils before, sometimes it can take up to 3 to 6 months or longer to get those right people in those roles. So having that planning up front is really important.
Okay, and Fee, what's your experience?
Look, I 100% agree with Rebecca. Our experience is a lot of boards actually don't plan. And as you say, it's a surprise, gosh, we better do something because we have a vacancy. Or they do plan, but they don't implement every aspect of it. And it's this full cycle that Rebecca and I really would recommend. And I think that's why it's important to have a look at each key element of it, Andrew.
Okay. So that's an excellent introduction. Fee, let's look at the key elements of the director transition cycle. So first up, we've got planning. Rebecca and Fee, how should boards start planning?
Well, as I've just mentioned, planning is probably the most important part of that cycle. And as the saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So when thinking about that in mind, I want to give some real practical kind of insights around what my experience has been working with boards for 20 years is when you've got directors' terms coming up on the board, look at who, when the next term is up and who you're going to lose a few directors. Is going to be with a short period of time? Are you going to have continuity on the board? If you have done some board performance reviews and you've got a board skills matrix in place, what's the maturity of the board? Is it a mix? Have you got mature or more seasoned directors in there as well? And also take into account your short-term and your long-term strategy of the school. What's planned for the next 3 to 5 years? What do you want your board to look like? What kind of current skills do you have on your board, and what skills you're missing, and what skills you're going to need more of given the strategic plan that the board are going to be overseeing and monitoring for the next 3 to 5 years. This is where your board skills matrix, if you don't have one in place, it's really an important governance document to get in place, and it's a really good tool to use as a self-reflection tool for your board, but also in the planning process when you're trying to do succession planning and recruitment for your board. Then I think with those key skills and attributes in mind, you would get a really good sense of what your non-negotiables for your new directors are and what skills you actually need to bring onto the board. And then from there, you would get an idea of your ideal candidate. And then you would start your more holistic process around your recruitment and what that looks like.
Okay, excellent. And so Fee, what else should they think of? Are there other gaps to plan for?
No, I think the skills matrix part is essential. But what we're finding and what I've found from experience over the last many years of working with and looking at their skills and doing this planning is that we don't think broadly enough. We got stuck in that traditional view that we had to have a skills-based force, had to fundamentally have professional directors. And we immediately assumed that meant lawyers and accountants. But there's a very different view now that we need a much broader set of skills. One, we must have directors who actually understand the sector they're in, so they must understand the education system. Two, professional skills is incredibly important, but it's not everything. And three, we must have contemporary skills. And very much nowadays, they are around the environmental, social governance skills. They are around culture, being a member of the community, being a past student, and so on. But we're also including now other things about our directors that add to our diversity around the boardroom table, things such as their leadership styles, their behavioural styles, their learning styles, and do you actually, as a director, represent a minority group in our community? So I think the key is, as well as the skills matrix, is that diversity of the kind of skills that really allow us to have the right conversations around the board.
Thanks, Fee. Obviously, we start with planning, and the next step is to look at recruitment. And recruitment always seems to be such a difficult process for school boards in finding the right directors. Rebecca, in your experience, what are some methods to ensure successful recruitment?
Recruitment can be a long process, but it's really about getting clear about what the qualities that are going to really add value to your board and your decision making, those non-negotiables that I mentioned, and getting an idea what an ideal candidate looks like. part of that process is developing a really clear position description at the very beginning. That's a must do. In director recruitment, as with any role you're going to be recruiting, you need to keep in mind that the candidate is interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. They want to see, is it the right fit, the right board, or the right place, or what can I contribute or learn from this in a meaningful way? You're going to want to attract your ideal candidate who's passionate about the purpose and vision of the schools and really wants to make that contribution. So it's also looking at getting clear on your value proposition of joining the board and communicating clearly the purpose and values of the school, the vision and strategy, which the director is going to be part of. And it's an opportunity to really showcase your school and organization. And I think for me, when I think back on that, I've gone through a lot of these processes, is about being really clear up front. So they have no surprises on the time commitment and the expectations of the role. And also thinking about what does that recruitment process look like? Is it going to be an interview panel? Is it going to be the chair meeting the preferred candidates? As a final step, are the two of the preferred candidates going to come in and observe a board meeting? And then looking to really leverage multiple channels to try and get that awareness out there that you're looking for a director and you have your clear value proposition in place. So things that you can use are like your school networks, referrals. You could use a professional director recruiter. You could also take out an ad in a local newspaper or the Australian Financial Review. There's lots of forums you can post on. There's women on boards. You could also use like the director recruitment posting news board on the Australian Institute of Company Directors. A lot of the professional directors are a member of this. There's just a few channels for you to consider using multiple channels when you have a position vacant. So you get an array of candidates and you can find the right person to fit the role.
Yeah, some great tips there already. We don't have to wait for the top tips. That's fantastic, Rebecca. P, your thoughts, anything to add?
Oh, absolutely fantastic tips, Rebecca. And to add to those, with all of those wonderful things in place, is when you actually have that selection committee and criteria to actually be able to use data to assist you to make really good decisions. And in our world, don't just use your skills matrix for your present directors, use the skills matrix for your part of your interview as well, because then you can line up the data of your preferred candidates with the data of those you already have and see, do they really fill those gaps? Particularly, we're finding of great interest that it's not necessarily about those professional skills and things, or even the sector skills. That's the final decision piece. It's about the leadership style or the style of the person that you're bringing onto the board and how do they impact on the team. That is an incredibly helpful part of your recruitment process. And I guess to add to that, as Rebecca said, that interview is crucial because they really are interviewing you as well. And the way you conduct yourself and what you sent them for that interview, even being professional enough to do the skills matrix, starts to show you off in a really highly valuable professional way.
Okay, thanks, Fee. We've found our recruit, and now we've got the induction process. Obviously, this is very important in terms of the stability piece. So, Fee, what are some of the key strategies for a successful director induction?
It's incredible because even though it's such a crucial piece, with all of our reviews, it's highlighted that over 44% of directors are not confident that they did induction or that it was done properly. So there's a big opportunity to get this right, because apart from the interview and all the things that Rebecca and I have already been talking about, this is the opportunity for you to start that engagement piece. And back to Andrew's point at the beginning of the importance of engaging our workforce, we also need to engage our directors and engage them in the values and the purpose and the strategy, and help them understand the risks of the organisation moving forward. We actually did a piece of research in 2019 with an organisation where we actually trialled for a year the directors when they came on, doing their skills matrix and then basing their induction plan on the skills matrix results, as well, of course, as all of the information that you would give a director about your organisation. And we compared the data and the feedback from the directors with those who'd been inducted or not inducted, as they say, the year before. And the improvement in their ability to start contributing to the board, in their engagement in the organisation's purpose and values, and their desire to stay on, and also being chosen to be on the right board committee, was about a 50% increase. So
Yeah,
we
wow.
would highly recommend it. Yes, it was, and I checked the results, it really was that.
Yeah, okay. So it's obviously incredibly important. Rebecca, what experience do you have in engaging director induction?
I totally agree 100% with what Fee's just mentioned, because I really believe a comprehensive induction process for new board members is going to help them contribute more quickly and more appropriately. Because when you think about it, directors' liabilities start as soon as they're appointed. The sooner you can get them up to speed in terms of knowing the business, their duties and responsibilities, the better. In my experience, some of the more engaging director inductions have been, and you probably won't be surprised to hear this, as Fee mentioned, they've been well planned. They need to know about what they need to know about the sector, understanding the role, their expectations of the board, the business operations, financial position, strategy, and the key risks the organizations are facing. And as Fee mentioned also, they need to be tailored to the individual director. It has to be thought about before. Most of the boards forget to tailor their induction program and start to push out the same induction program, but you really think about the director. Where are they coming from? What skills do they bring to the table? Where they are going to need additional support for onboarding? What information they need to do their role, and any formal training or professional development they're going to lead. But also what I found was really useful in the past when dealing with a lot of my directors was asking them, what's your preferred communication style and how should I engage with you? Getting that up front. Because if someone is more on email or FaceTime or any of those kind of meetings, you want to engage them in a way that's meaningful for them from the very, very start. You'll also, all of those inductions really have to cover the board's roles and responsibilities, but also it's really good to hear from the CEO and the executives, provide a brief overview on their organization and their roles, how they engage with the board, and what a really good element is about the key challenges they face in their role, which is really useful context for about the things that they might discuss with the board going forward. Obviously, with the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of board induction and onboarding of directors for different clients remotely, but inductions are better face-to-face if possible. What other boards have done in the past is to invite current directors to all or part of the induction and have a lunch or a working lunch so they can meet their peers in a more informal manner before the board meeting, which really helps with building some of those cohesive board relationships up front. You can also consider having a more experienced board member as their mentor or buddy, and they can offer insights to a new member who can navigate those early few meetings early on. And I suppose the key takeaway from is that I would say is also, when you think about inductions, have refreshers. Do not set and forget. Really consider what professional development, what area the board needs to revisit or have a refresh in the next 9 to 12 months, and put a plan in place to address it.
Excellent. So we've obviously had our planning, we've gone through the recruitment process, we now have inducted our new directors, but it doesn't stop there. Rebecca, maybe if you could continue on and tell us about the importance of continued development.
Continuous formal learning and training and development and education is really a vital activities that directors and boards really should undertake. I can't stress how important it is. Ongoing formal director and board development is really crucial for a number of reasons. Firstly, we're here to talk about risk. It's really good risk management for a school and for those individual board members to undertake and be across it. The directors have legal requirements placed on them, and there's also that level of increased community expectation and the changing governance landscape that is changing and evolving at the time that they're operating in. When you think about investing into director education and development, it's really an investment in your school. Much like when you think about investing or upskilling an employee when they come on board in your organization, boards should have a training budget or some sort of a budget allocated each year for director development. And I know I've worked with different boards that we've had to push for that. and organizations, some volunteer organizations worked with, we've pushed first where they either fully or partially fund the director's education. That's also a value add when you're trying to attract a director in a recruitment process. So it also provides board members with the ability to undertake training. And it's really, when you're thinking about what sets you apart from other schools that are going to be recruiting, if you have that in place, it's definitely a value add, and it shows that you're going to invest in their professional development to help them contribute in a meaningful way. The other thing I would say about professional development for directors is that having directors attend those formal programs that are run by a number of different service providers is going to increase that board's network. And this is really beneficial because you can use, when you're looking for future board and committee members, you can use that network. It also builds awareness of the school's profile and its purpose in those networks. And it builds confidence for the director as well. The confidence to ask the right questions, to seek the right information, to challenge, and to drive a viewpoint or hold people accountable, whether in a board meeting and through deliberations. When I think about the type of director education and development, I would think back to some of the board reviews. So if you haven't done a board review or you're going to do a board review, ask the board what training and development they would like. If you're reviewing or updating your board skills matrix, or if you're even preparing your board agenda forward planner for the year and it's going to the board for discussion, that's a really good time to ask your directors, whether it's outside the meeting, to give you some suggestions to consider for formal training. So there's plenty of courses and avenues available for board professional development. Some of those, I'll give you some ideas. Some of those may be around having potentially an external presenter to present to the board on things like technology or cyber risk, looking at data breaches. There's a lot of new privacy laws and fines that have come in. You could even look into the evolution of ESG, which is a hot topic right now. You could look at digital transformation. The pandemic has really been a catalyst for companies and schools to shift to digital processes. And there's lots of new laws and regulations that do impact different industries. When I think about conferences, potentially you would have the risk and governance conferences. There's 3 or 4 of them that happen each year, and there's lots of different courses. So the Australian Institute of Company Directors and the Governance Institute of Australia both have short courses, and I've actually worked with them and done a lot of their courses. So a lot of their courses range from how to be an effective chair right through to looking at cyber risk for directors. And last night I just got an email. I wrote a note to myself. I got an email from AICD and I wanted to say it today. So I wasn't aware, but AICD have a not-for-profit scholarship for new and emerging directors, and I think the applications are open, so you can actually get some of your training or potential courses funded through that. So I think that's a really good opportunity for a school or a not-for-profit to look into that.
Yeah, okay, thanks for sharing, Rebecca. And for you've, I think, done a bit of work with the director skills matrix around this and have some stats that would be worthwhile sharing as well.
Yes, absolutely, and fabulous tips. Thank you, Rebecca. Really good for everyone today. But our insights add to what Rebecca's talking about, in that the data has really shown us, as I said, we don't just look at the sector-specific governance responsibilities and the professional, but we also look at the contemporary areas as well. And the data has been really interesting, coming back to us and showing that 62% of directors feel that they have low ESG, which is environmental social governance capabilities. Now, when we're talking about environmental social governance, everybody, we're talking about not just climate change. The environment is all about our footprint, and what are we doing about that? The social part of this is our handprint, and what are we doing about all those people issues, which is a direct nod to workforce and all of those other #1 issues that we're dealing with. So if you think of 62% of directors saying this is something I don't feel confident about, both as my own skills and as what are we doing at the board level, then it is an exponentially high potential risk. And so too is the fact that 73% of directors say that they are actually low on cybersecurity skills as well. which again is an even greater risk. So what we're finding is that there are, of course, a lot of our traditional areas for education to build boards to be high functioning, but also there is a need for some contemporary and newer emerging risks that boards need to start talking about and get education for.
So what I'm hearing really, it's not rocket science, right? Development is an investment into the future, which then you get the return on investment and you have a high functioning board. We'll move on to the mentorship piece coupled with that and just how important it is for directors. So Rebecca, over to you.
I'm a big advocate for mentorship or buddy systems. I think a board mentorship has multiple benefits. First of all, an experienced board member gets to make a new friend, but also a new board member feels like they're successfully integrating or onboarding onto a new board. And you're more likely to have a really cohesive board engagement and a better board team altogether. That's going to benefit your schools for years to come. You can have a look at internal programs or join an external program or have something really informal. When you're thinking about a board buddy system or some kind of a mentorship program, it's really important to buddy up based on skills and experience and buddy those longer serving and more experienced members to take the new directors under their wing. It doesn't have to be a big time commitment. It could be a monthly coffee catch up, a pre or a post board chat, or it could even be a regular Zoom. Some of the boards I work with, we get the secretary to the board to organize them, to book a place for coffee, to put the Zooms in place, or to book a place for lunch once every 6 weeks. So it takes that administrative burden away from it and they're really scheduled at regular intervals. So I think it's really important to have in place and not to overcomplicate it, to think about what's right for your school and what you can put in place easily to help things run smoother.
Yeah. And I think mentorship is incredibly important, no matter your role in the workforce. And so that should go through to the board as well. It's an invaluable experience to receive, but to also give back. So thank you, Rebecca. So retirement or end of tenure or end of term. Retirement is not just about age. It's obviously in this context, it's about, it might be a 3-year tenure or something along those lines. Finally, Fee, over to you. Why is retirement or a director reaching their term on the board as important as any other step in the director transition cycle?
It's just such an important part of planning, and it's often secret squirrel business because it is the one thing that should not be a surprise to everybody is, so what are the skills we want in the chair? How long is the chair staying on? Openly, who are the next directors in line? And is the deputy chair actually going to go on and be the chair, particularly in Rebecca's point about all of the investment in development? Is that person actually going to stay on? I'm sure, Rebecca, you and I both see this all the time, where you meet the deputy chair when you're doing a board review and they go, but I've got no intention of becoming the chair. And that is very disappointing and very worrying for everybody. It should also include succession around the other important teams on the board, which are your board subcommittees. And back to the need for a skills matrix. What are the kinds of skills we need on certain committees, and who will be the chair and who will be the deputy chair, and actually be prepared to then be the chair when the present chair is moving on. And this should all be a part of our planning. And I'm a great believer in it being transparent and actually being a part of our open discussions at the board. It's a great document and it actually gives people, and a lot of people really look forward to having the opportunity to try a leadership role. It's equally as important in the executive team as well, and the board mustn't forget that that is something that they need to support happening as well. But it also really helps you as a director to think you've completed the circle. Actually come in, you know when your legacy is due. You know that you're going to actually leave something of value, because, as Rebecca and I have been saying, these roles are not for profit. They are not reimbursed. They are reimbursed with development, but you really are there to add value, and you want to know that is going to happen. And I think that it's about reaching the ultimate success. And it is as important a part of a plan as is the bringing people on. So I would urge people to be just as open about this as they are about all the other elements of this fantastic transition cycle.
Okay. All righty. Moving on. So there's obviously been a lot of information shared today, and no doubt a lot of great tips have been picked up along the way. But if you had your top tips just to leave with the audience today, Fee and Rebecca, what would they be?
You won't be surprised. I think it's start with your planning. The planning is so important, and the board skills matrix is a really useful, valuable tool in that process.
I would 100% agree with that. And I think my observation too, Rebecca, is that boards really need to invest in these things, and that will really enable them to do them successfully, because a boardroom full of high-functioning directors is a major asset for oversight of risk and driving strategy. I like the second one. I think induction is key. Absolutely. It really does disengage and disappoint directors if it's done badly. And I think they're, again, using that skills matrix, but using a lot of those things that you talked about, Rebecca, is essential for induction. And do not make it a one-off event.
Yeah.
Make it an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
The thing about it, if you invest the time now and get a really good induction program, you won't have to build all the content again. It's more about tweaking and bespoking it to that director that's coming on. So if you invest the time to get a really good, thorough induction plan in place, it's not just set and forget. It's like you actually have great content there that you can leverage, and you put the lens of, this director has these skills, they have these areas they may need to learn. How do we support that? That's a totally different conversation.
What I see here is continuous, right? So continuous planning. You start with planning, but you're finishing with planning. So you never actually finish planning. You're always planning. And that's, you obviously got the review cycle process in the middle there, but also the continuous development to have a high functioning board. So there's the top 4 tips for the audience today. And look, Fee and Rebecca, thank you both so much for providing these wonderful insights today. A final comment from me is that, look, succession planning is the #1 duty of a board. A sudden loss of leadership is a huge risk for organisations. Your competitors are addressing the same issues you are, said the leader of PwC's risk practice in the insurance sector. And he also said, you need to be thinking about whether you are doing it as well as they are. You need to be as good or better.
Yeah.
Look, that brings us to the close of the formal presentation today. I'd just like to say thank you to our listeners for giving up some of your precious time today. I hope each and every one of you have taken something valuable away from the information shared. All the best for the rest of your day, and the presentation will be shared with you all shortly. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.